Sunday morning sunlight crept through the blinds of our Denver apartment, those pale winter beams glinting off the kitchen counter in a way that made every fingerprint on the stainless steel shine. I had just sat down with my first mug of coffee when something caught my eye. An email printout lying almost perfectly squared on the counter, like someone had set it there to be noticed or maybe just forgotten to hide. It wasn't a receipt from the grocery store or a coupon from the coffee shop downstairs. This was different. The heading was bold. Boutique Riverlight Hotel, electronic receipt. Date, last night. Check-in after midnight. Late checkout approved for noon today. Guest name, Maya Cole. For a moment, I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe a forwarded bill from her office, something she'd picked up for work. But the next line snagged my attention. Payment processed with our joint card. No mention of her company, no corporate rate notation. Just her name, personal rate. Right next to it, like props on a stage, were two crumpled paper wristbands, bright orange, the kind they use at concerts. The printing on them was smudged from sweat or maybe rain, but I could still make out the date and the name of a touring band I knew had played downtown last night. And there was one more thing. A folded taxi receipt. Drop-off time. 12:47 a.m. Drop-off location. Riverlight Hotel. I stared at the collection of items for a long moment, the way you stare at puzzle pieces before you're sure they fit together. I'm not a naturally suspicious person, or at least I never thought I was. But the fact that these pieces were lying here in plain sight, almost daring me to connect them, made my stomach tighten. Curiosity pulled me to the dishwasher. I opened it, and there, in the top rack, stood two long-stem wine glasses. They were rinsed but not washed, still faintly clouded from drying without soap. I lifted one and brought it close. The scent that drifted out was unmistakable. Not the citrusy perfume Maya sometimes wore, but the warm, sharp trace of men's cologne. Not mine. When she finally emerged from the bedroom, she was in her robe, hair still damp from the shower, steam following her into the kitchen. She looked like someone easing into a slow Sunday, but there was a faint tension in her jaw that didn't match the casual pace of her movements. "What's all this?" I asked, nodding toward the counter. She glanced down, barely pausing before reaching for the coffee tin. "Work trip," she said, matter of fact. "Corporate event ran later than expected, so they moved me to a hotel near the venue. Easier than driving back." I waited for more, an explanation for the concert bands, the taxi, the wine glasses, but she kept her back to me, measuring coffee grounds into the machine. "What about the concert?" I asked. "Oh, that," she said, as if I'd caught her out on something minor. "It was part of the corporate package. Client thing." She turned, offering a smile that was almost convincing. "You know how they love to wine and dine people." I set my mug down. "And the taxi receipt?" Her shoulders lifted in a small shrug. "Company card wasn't going through. I'll sort it out with accounting Monday." Then she tilted her head at me, her voice softening into something that sounded like concern but felt like deflection. "You've been really suspicious lately, Evan. You're tired. You've been working late nights. Maybe you're reading too much into things." I almost laughed at how quickly the conversation had shifted. Not toward clarifying details, but toward my supposed state of mind. She was good at this, I realized. Too good. She didn't rush, didn't over-explain. She placed the burden on me like I was the one with the problem. I nodded slowly, but inside, my thoughts were stacking up like unstable bricks. The timeline didn't match. The details didn't match. And her tone, calm, rehearsed, carried the same rhythm as a story told for the second or third time. She topped off her mug and left the kitchen, humming softly, like we'd just discussed the weather. I stayed seated at the table, the coffee cooling in my hands, my eyes drawn again and again to the receipt, the wristbands, the taxi slip. They were ordinary objects in isolation, but together they told a story I couldn't yet put into words. One she clearly didn't want me to write. And so, instead of pressing further, I let her win that round. I gathered the papers, slid them back into a neat stack, and placed them in the drawer by the fridge. Out of sight, but not out of mind. Because whatever this was, it wasn't over. The week after the hotel receipt, my brain turned into a filing cabinet. I started noticing things I used to wave away as busy days or quirks I should ignore if I wanted to be the chill husband. Maybe they'd always been there. Maybe I'd trained myself not to see them. Her phone, for starters. It used to live face up on the coffee table, pinging weather updates and calendar reminders we both pretended to care about. Now it was face down, always, haptics off, banner previews gone. The kind of configuration you give a device when you don't want it announcing anything to the room. Sometimes it would buzz and she'd sweep it into a pocket with a breezy just work. Other times it didn't buzz at all because Do Not Disturb glowed like a tiny purple shield. Focus mode, she said, smiling like she'd learned a productivity hack, and then changed the subject to the dog or the groceries or anything that wasn't the notification she just avoided. Location sharing did a magic trick. We'd kept it on for years because we're the kind of people who forget where the food truck moved or which trailhead we parked at. One Tuesday it blinked out on her side. Glitch, she said, flipping it back with a sigh big enough to sell sincerity. 2 days later it disappeared again. Soon it developed a rhythm. On when she was home, off when she wasn't. It was like the setting could smell my curiosity and shut itself down. I stopped feeling guilty about noticing. I started writing things down. Cash withdrawals showed up on our joint account. $80 on a Thursday, $120 the next week. Odd amounts the week after. Always mid-afternoon. Always from ATMs in the same slice of the map by the river where we never shop and don't have friends. When I asked, she told me some vendors at events just prefer cash. I wanted to accept that. The addresses formed a red loop around that neighborhood anyway. Rideshare charges followed. Not many, but strange. Unpredictable. I know exactly what it costs to get from our building to Union Station or to the workshop. These were late-night pickups from side streets that cut parallel to the main drag, with drop-offs in a tight grid I could cover in 10 minutes on foot. Different corners, same destination if I drew the circle wide enough. Then she discovered yoga on Fridays. She rolled a brand new mat and wore a matching set that made our bedroom look like an ad. Helps my back, she said, keys in hand, promising to be home by 9. One night, more restless than usual, I checked the studio schedule. No late class. That same night, a bar 2 blocks away posted a story of a live show starting at 8. The kind with dim lights and neon Pilsner signs. I told myself lots of studios forget to update their sites. A week later, a glossy envelope arrived. A Pilates membership at a wellness collective that sells cold plunges and smoothies with celestial names. I turned the card over. The address sat across from the Riverlight side entrance. The one with a single brass lamp and a camera people forget is there. Spending changed in small, telling ways. 2 drink tabs at places we'd never visited together. Happy hours at lounges with menus that were more about the ice than the food. Client thing, she'd say, tapping a receipt like it was boring her. Team unwind. Then she'd tease me for tracking it. You've become a spreadsheet with shoes. I laughed, then exported the transactions into, yes, an actual spreadsheet. Even our shared devices felt different. One morning a saved password didn't autofill on the laptop. Then another vanished. Her messaging apps wanted fresh verification like I'd never signed in before. Little locks kept appearing on icons I used to open without thinking. Threads that once were stuffed with memes and recipes grew skeletal. She'd hand me her phone to show a picture, then tilt it away when a silent banner crept down from the top edge. It was choreography and I was the audience. I wanted a benign explanation, some dumb technical reason that could account for the way my gut was learning a new, darker language. But each small denial echoed the last, and echoes stack until they feel like a wall. Twice, the rideshare app on our forgotten tablet chimed, "Your trip has ended." Even though I was at home. Old permissions, I guess. Both trips ended near the river, inside the same quarter-mile that keeps getting underlined. A neighbor across the hall, Jill, the basil-in-the-window woman who knows everybody's dog's name, caught me in the elevator and asked if Maya liked the new musician playing the riverfront bars. I must have made a face. Jill's smile stiffened. I only ask because I saw her over there late the other night with a younger guy. Tall, lighter hair. They looked busy. She said it like someone telling you there's black ice on your steps. I nodded, rode to the lobby, and stood in the mailroom sorting coupons I didn't need while my chest did little drum rolls. Younger guy. Riverfront. Busy. I carried the flyers upstairs and put them straight into the recycling like they were hot. What unsettled me most wasn't any one thing. It was the clockwork of the whole pattern. If I mapped the weeks, Fridays bulged. If I pinned the receipts, they arced around the hotel. If I charted her mood, it rose before yoga and sank after Pilates. It was simple enough for a kid to color inside the lines. I started sleeping on the edge of the bed like I might fall if I moved an inch. She'd slide in late, smelling like wind and citrus and something masculine I don't own. She'd kiss my shoulder and whisper, "You're tense." As if tension were a problem I'd invented. I told myself I wouldn't accuse without proof. I told myself I wouldn't become the stereotype, the guy zooming in on reflections in a wineglass. But suspicion is a muscle. Once it's awake, it doesn't go back to sleep because you ask nicely. One Saturday I walked the river path past the farmer's market and the patios, all the way to the hotel's side street with the brass lamp. I pretended to be a guy who likes fresh air more than answers. The door chimed. A group spilled out laughing, anonymous, harmless. I watched faces for meaning and found none. The wind carried fryer oil and music. I went home, irritated at myself for auditioning as a detective without a badge. Back in the apartment, I opened the notes app I'd been avoiding and typed the thing I couldn't say out loud. It isn't random. It isn't stress. It isn't me being paranoid. Something is happening. That night, she set her phone face down on the nightstand. The screen lit anyway, a pale secret glow against the wall. I didn't touch it. I counted the breaths between pulses the way you count lightning and thunder. The distance wasn't growing. Morning came soft and ordinary. I made pancakes. She said they were perfect and kissed my cheek. And for 3 minutes the kitchen felt like the safe room it used to be. Then a notification fluttered across her watch and her shoulders tightened a fraction. "Laundry," she said, lifting her phone as if it were attached. By then the denial wasn't hers. It was mine. The dots had become a line. And every time I traced it, the line pointed the same direction. Downriver, past the bars advertising live sets, past the wellness collective with the cold plunges, to the Riverlight's brasslit side door. I didn't have the ending, but I had the map. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the first piece of proof fell right into my lap. I wasn't looking for it. Not in that moment anyway, but when you've been living in a fog of doubt for months, your mind is primed to catch any sharp glint in the dark. I'd taken a break from work to scroll through my phone, *ling time, when a friend's social media story popped up. I almost swiped past it without thinking, but something in the thumbnail, neon lights, a familiar stage, made me stop. It was from a concert 2 nights earlier, one I hadn't gone to. I tapped it open. The shaky video panned across the crowd, bass thumping so hard I could almost feel it in my chest. Then, for just a second, the camera settled. My stomach tightened. There, in the middle of the frame, was Maya. Her head tilted up toward a tall man with sandy blonde hair. She was leaning into him, not just close but in asterisk mate clothes. Her face tipped toward his in a way that erased any buffer between strangers. His hand was cupped around the side of her neck, and his mouth brushed hers in a kiss so deliberate that my pulse spiked just watching it. It wasn't a stolen moment in a shadow. It was center stage to anyone who cared to look. And she didn't care. The man was tagged in the post at Tyler Dune. A click later, I was on his profile. Musician. Local shows. Enough followers to matter, but not enough to be untouchable. His grid was full of dim-lit performance, *TS, guitar slung low, that same light hair catching the stage lights. And there, buried a few rows down, was a group photo from the same night. Maya, standing beside him, grinning, arm hooked through his. No hat, no hoodie, no effort to hide. I just sat there, phone heavy in my hand, the room tilting slightly as my mind ran through every yoga class and late work event in the past month. The pieces clicked faster now, almost too fast for me to keep up. It wasn't just my friend's video, either. I reached out to a guy I knew from the stage crew scene, Tom, someone I'd helped with his bike repair last year. I sent him the clip and asked if he'd seen her there. His reply was almost immediate. "Yeah, man. Saw them together backstage a few weeks ago. Didn't know you two knew each other. That last line hit hard. Didn't know you two knew each other. As if it were a given that Maya and Tyler were linked in some way. I pressed for details, and Tom didn't hesitate. They've been around a lot lately. She comes to his shows, sometimes they leave together. Always late night. Riverlight's their spot. He likes the quiet there after gigs. There it was again, the Riverlight. That brass-lampied side entrance I'd walked past on my pointless reconnaissance trip. Tom told me one more thing before I could stop him. They don't even try to hide it. Guess that's why I didn't think it was a secret. Public and indisputable. My chest felt like it had been hollowed out. I pulled up the Riverlight's events log, the one they post on their website for guests. Sure enough, the weekend wristbands I'd found lined up perfectly with a night Tyler had played a set downtown. Cross-referenced that with the rideshare charges I'd cataloged, and it was like tracing a thread through a maze. It all led back to the same rooms, the same dates, the same man. By the time Maya came home that evening, I already knew the truth in a way I couldn't unknow. She breezed in with a tote bag over her shoulder, wearing that loose post-event smile she'd been perfecting. "How was your day?" she asked, setting her keys down like nothing in our world had shifted. I wanted to lay it all out right then. Show her the screensh *TS, the tagged post, the map of her lies. But I didn't. Not yet. I just studied her. The way her eyes didn't linger on mine for more than a few seconds. The way she moved around the room with a restless energy, as if standing still too long might pin her in place. The urge to confront was there, sharp and hot, but another instinct cut in, colder, more deliberate. She'd been running this play for months, maybe longer. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of catching me in the chaos she'd created. I wanted her to see what it felt like when the ground gave way under her feet instead. That night, I saved every screensh *T to a hidden folder. The video from my friend's story, Tyler's tagged profile, the group photo, Tom's messages, even the Riverlight booking confirmations. It was all there, lined up in chronological order like evidence in a case file. I lay in bed long after she'd fallen asleep beside me, her breathing slow and even. My mind wasn't quiet. It was running through the next steps, weighing each option. I could blow it all up tomorrow. Or I could wait. Gather more. Make sure there was no angle she could twist into a misunderstanding. Because now I had the proof. And once it came out, there wouldn't be any going back. I didn't make a big scene. No shouting matches, no smashed plates. That wasn't for her benefit. It was for mine. The anger was there, white hot, but I'd learned enough about her rhythm to know that she thrived in emotional chaos. It was where she could twist the story, cast herself as the one who'd been wronged, turn my reaction into the crime and her behavior into a footnote. So instead, I got quiet, surgical. It started with the finances. Our joint accounts had always been a tangle: autopays, subscriptions, overdraft protection linked to my personal checking. I opened a brand new account at a bank across town, one she'd never used. My salary was redirected there within the week. The joint debit card still worked, but only because I let it. One evening, while she was meeting friends, I logged into our accounts from the kitchen counter and began pruning. The shared overdraft closed. My credit card linked to her mobile wallet removed. I left her with her own card, the one she'd been using for her so-called yoga nights, but the backup was gone. She could still spend, but the net she'd been leaning on was cut. The next morning, I set aside enough cash to cover the rest of the rent for the month. After that, I scheduled a stop payment order. Our lease was due for renewal in 60 days. I wasn't going to be here when that came around, and I wasn't going to be the one scrambling to cover it when she found herself alone in this apartment. Maya, meanwhile, was in a phase I recognized as preemptive justification. Long talks about personal growth, sudden references to her right to independence, speeches about how couples could love each other without being entangled. It was language designed to sound enlightened while also laying the groundwork for her exit. If she was the one to leave, it would be framed as an act of self-actualization, not abandonment. I didn't argue. I encouraged her. "You should absolutely have your independence," I told her one night over dinner, and watched the way her smile faltered, like she'd expected me to push back. By the second week, I had moved all essential documents, birth certificate, passport, tax records, into a locked case in my office at work. I wasn't going to risk a frantic morning hunt when things finally blew up. I kept a neat, separate folder of her documents, too. When the time came, I wanted it to be easy. Her spending patterns didn't change much at first. A couple of rideshare charges to the riverfront. The occasional $14 cocktail at a lounge we'd never set foot in together. But I noticed a shift in her timing. Fewer Friday night absences, more evenings at home, and an uptick in domestic theater. Elaborate dinners that materialized out of nowhere. Fresh flowers on the table. Polished floors that smelled faintly of lemon oil. I knew enough not to mistake this for remorse. Around the same time, word came through the grapevine. Tyler, the man who'd been the axis of all this, was out. He'd ended it. Casual thing, nothing serious, he'd told someone. That nothing serious was the part that stuck to my ribs. For months she'd been risking everything, and the guy she'd risked it for had dismissed her like a weather update. If she was trying to reset the stage at home now, it wasn't because she wanted me back. It was because the alternative, the silence that follows when you're discarded, was more frightening than anything she'd imagined. I didn't bite. Instead, I made my physical exit without moving out. I spent more nights at my workshop, staying late to finish projects, then crashing on the couch there. I didn't announce it, I just did it. My things began to disappear from the bedroom drawers, replaced with neatly folded gaps she didn't comment on. By the end of the month, the joint utilities were in her name alone. The email confirmations landed in my inbox, and I forwarded them to her without a word. She didn't reply. The thing about independence, real independence, is that it's not just a word you throw into a fight to sound principled. It's bills and rent and groceries that don't magically restock themselves. It's realizing that the safety net you thought was woven into the fabric of your life was actually being held up by someone else's hands. One Thursday night, she came home to find an organized stack of papers on the kitchen island. On top, a single page outlining the changes, bank accounts, rent, utilities. Underneath, a breakdown of our last 3 months' expenses, highlighting what I'd already covered and what was now hers. Her voice carried that half-laugh, half-scoff tone she used when she didn't know where to aim her irritation. So what is this? An invoice? It's a record, I said evenly. You wanted independence. This is what it looks like. She scanned the top sheet and set it down a little too hard. This is petty, Evan. Maybe, I said, but it's clear. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't tell her about the screensh *TS, the videos, the corroborating witnesses. That was for later. Right now, the goal wasn't to win an argument. It was to make sure she understood that the scaffolding was gone, and I wasn't going to hold up her half of the roof anymore. Over the next week, the tone of her independence speeches softened. The word "we" crept back into her vocabulary. She lingered in the doorway when I was reading, asked about my day in a way that almost sounded real. But I could see the calculation in her eyes, the quick mental math of someone trying to figure out if the bridge she'd set on fire was still crossable. I didn't answer the question for her. I just kept moving my life, piece by piece, out of the reach of her grasp. And with every step, the apartment felt less like ours and more like a place I just happened to be passing through on my way to somewhere better. The decision to bring someone else into the apartment wasn't about replacing her. It was about reclaiming the space. For months, this place had been a holding pen for tension, silent meals, half-truths, and the steady drip of distrust. I wanted order. Not just physical order, but the kind that makes you feel like you've drawn a clean line between before and after. Rena Hayes came recommended by our building's property manager, a guy who'd seen her transform some truly hopeless apartments. Professional organizer wasn't even the right term for her. She was part archivist, part engineer, part therapist for people drowning in their own stuff. When I called, she didn't flinch at the situation. You want systems, she said. Not just shelves. Systems. She arrived on a Tuesday morning with a rolling cart of supplies and a deliberate calm that made me think she'd seen far worse than our cluttered second bedroom. I showed her the workroom first. My workshop overflow that had bled into the apartment, plus stacks of files and cables and unopened mail I'd stopped dealing with when suspicion had eaten up my mental bandwidth. For 3 hours, she sorted and labeled while I answered questions about what was worth keeping. She set up a filing system that made the chaos look almost dignified. Old digital backups were consolidated and encrypted. Expired accounts were closed with passwords changed on the rest. Digital gaps, she called them. Places someone could slip through without you noticing. By the time she left that first day, the apartment felt lighter. Not happier, just less choked. Maya didn't mention Rena's visit, but I knew she noticed. She moved through the newly cleared workroom slower than usual, running her fingers along the labeled bins like they were in a museum. That night, she was uncharacteristically quiet, like she was trying to figure out where this sudden burst of order had come from. 2 days later, she pivoted. The shift was almost cinematic. Full spread dinners laid out before I got home, candles lit, glasses of wine waiting, floors polished to a mirror shine, fresh flowers in a vase on the table every other morning. She moved through the kitchen like she was auditioning for a lifestyle show, all soft lighting and perfect plating. It was transparent. Rena kept coming back twice a week, working through the rest of the apartment with a precision that felt more and more like a boundary being drawn. She didn't ask about Maya, didn't linger in conversation beyond what the work required. But there was a certain weight in the air when the two of them crossed paths. Maya suddenly busy in another room when Rena was in the house. Rena nodding politely if they passed in the hallway, then going back to her sorting. Around the same time, I heard from Tom again, the stage crew contact who'd first confirmed Tyler's existence in my orbit. He didn't mince words. He's done with her. Told people it was casual. Didn't mean anything. It was almost funny, in the bitter way things get when you've been too close to them for too long. Months of deception, the slow demolition of our marriage, all for something that could be shrugged off by the other party as casual. And now here she was, pivoting from nights out to domestic pageantry, as if replacing a musician's attention with mine were just a matter of cooking enough risotto. I played along, politely, neutrally, but didn't engage beyond the surface. Thanked her for dinner, complimented the flowers, then went to my workshop or dove into one of the new systems Rena had set up. The message was clear without being spoken. The work happening here wasn't about her anymore. What struck me was how much the apartment itself seemed to change in those weeks. The clutter disappeared. The later piles that had been sitting on the coffee table for months were gone. The kitchen drawers actually closed all the way. Even my email felt lighter, now that Rena had set filters to sort invoices and receipts automatically. It was as if the home was being restored to a neutral state. Somewhere I could breathe again. Somewhere I could think without tripping over the residue of her choices. Maya's mood tracked this shift in ways she probably didn't realize. At first, the domestic campaign was almost frantic, 2, sometimes 3 elaborate gestures in a single week. Then, as it became clear I wasn't responding in the way she hoped, she started to falter. The meals were simpler. The flowers came less often. Her conversations thinned out into the kind of small talk you make with a neighbor in the elevator. I didn't press her for anything more. I didn't ask about Tyler. I didn't mention the messages, the photos, the hotel receipts. They were all still in my possession, untouched in their folder, waiting for the moment they'd be most useful. When Rena finished the last project, a deep reorganization of the hall closet that had become a graveyard for forgotten coats and gift bags, I walked her to the door and thanked her. She handed me a small card with maintenance tips for the systems she'd set up. "If you keep it up, it'll stay this way," she said. Then, after a beat, "It's easier when everyone in the household is on the same page." I knew she wasn't asking a question. After she left, I stood in the hallway for a while, listening to the quiet. The apartment smelled faintly of cedar from the closet work. Maya was in the bedroom with the door half closed, scrolling through her phone. I watched her for a moment, then turned and walked into my newly cleared workroom, closing the door behind me. It was the first time in months I felt like the place belonged to me again. Not to us, and not to the mess she'd dragged through it. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that maybe that was the point all along.